Coming up on We Talk News this week, the big merger between Cresco Labs and Columbia Care blows up. 7 illegal dispensaries are shut down across the Empire State, New York, while the city continues to struggle with illegal legacy operations that are bypassing the new laws. In the meantime, the legal market in Maryland is thriving after just one record month. Ohio gets the signatures they needed to get adult use sales on the ballot. Plus, former pro wrestler and Minnesota Governor Jesse "the Body" Ventura is getting into the weed business in the land of 10,000 lakes. All that and coast-to-coast cannabis news coverage on We Talk News with Alaina Pinto. Next!
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News, Pro Cannabis Media's weekly roundup of cannabis news from coast to coast. I'm Alaina Pinto. It was supposed to be a mega merger between two of the biggest multi-state operators in the U.S., Cresco Labs and Columbia Care. They've been negotiating their already agreed upon merger since March of 2022. The expected $2 billion deal was broken up because of the overall downturn of the industry. The deal with Sean Diddy Combs is off as well. So the big MSOs don't get any bigger. And now the industry focus returns to the new markets like Minnesota, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. You may as well add in Maryland, since that state launched its adult use market. They are off to a record-setting pace, and Andrew Behringer has more and the latest on federal reform.
Andrew Behringer here with the DC Report for We Talk News. In federal news, Congress began its recess on July 31st. They are scheduled to return to the Capitol on September 5th, hopefully to pass the Safe Banking Act. Fingers crossed. In Maryland news, Maryland's first month of adult use cannabis sales are in. In the month of July, Marylanders spent a total of $87 million on cannabis, averaging about $2.8 million per day. Nearly 20,000 pounds or 10 tons of cannabis products were sold, with a $52 million sales coming from flower and pre-rolls. This represents a huge jump compared to June's medical cannabis sales of $42.7 million. Now, with these sales, the state brought in $4.6 million in new tax revenue. Now, if you remember, Missouri, which also legalized adult use cannabis last November with a ballot initiative like Maryland and has the same population as Maryland, saw $91 million in their first month of sales. So let's all keep an eye on that comparison, because it should be pretty interesting. Now, industry experts say that the market is still ramping up and has room for growth, pardon the pun, which a solid start. Eyes are now on the license application process, set to begin next month in September. Now, that's going to do it for me, Andrew Behringer, and the DC Area Report. Have a great day.
Next up is Minnesota, the 23rd state in the union to legalize adult use sales, and an old governor named Jesse Ventura is going to be entering the business there. Ventura was governor in Minnesota from 1999 to 2003. Many know him as the retired professional wrestler who was known as Jesse "the Body" Ventura when he was active. Ventura, though, is on record as one of the thousands of medicinal users who claim that cannabis saved his life. So now there will be a strain named after him, and his likeness will be the brand. Adult use sales began this week at Red Lake Reservation in Minnesota, one of 2 tribal entities being allowed to start retail sales in that state. So now let's turn to New York, which continues the slow rollout in the state with a legacy market that continues to thrive. So here's Pam Schmiel with the New York Cannabis Report.
I'm Pam Schmiel, host of the Mary Jane Society podcast with the New York Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. MasterCard may have pulled out of the cannabis industry, but AeroPay, another digital payment platform, wants in. Stupid Dope magazine reported that Tribal Dash, a Native American and woman-owned cannabis dispensary in Montauk, Long Island, just struck a deal with ArrowPay to process their transactions. So there you go. And listen up, New York lawmakers. One of New York City's first legal cannabis dispensaries just reported $12 million in sales for their first 6 months of operations. Just think what you can do with those tax dollars for New Yorkers. And the saga continues as New York plays whack-a-mole with unlicensed dispensaries. Law enforcement has now shifted their focus from New York City to upstate New York, where they've padlocked 7 unlicensed shops last week in an effort to support new legal dispensaries opening in the area. The owners are fighting back, of course, claiming they only give away samples. Oh, that trick. And lastly, Assemblyman Michael Nokahoff recently introduced a bill that aims to stop cannabis smoking in public. The measure has no co-sponsors and no companion bill in the Senate and is unlikely to get traction. That's this week's Cannabis Report for New York. I'm Pam Schmiel with Weed Talk News.
It looks like Ohio will be adding the ballot question of adult use legalization of cannabis at the next election. Last week, we reported the advocacy group, the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, was 679 signatures short of their goal. This week, they added a few thousand more. And barring any legal challenges, the voters of Ohio will get a chance to vote in adult use sales in the November election. In Connecticut, delivery services are thriving in that nascent market, and one of them has now added another 46 towns and cities to their legal delivery route. Angie Seifert has more from the Nutmeg State.
I'm Angie Seifert from Skip Intro Advisors with the Connecticut Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. When Connecticut's first cannabis delivery service began operating in June, it served only 5 towns. Now more than a third of the state could order cannabis delivery to their door. Green Coach Delivery, currently the only operating cannabis delivery service, is now in 46 Connecticut towns and cities. Though Green Coach was the first cannabis delivery service to get up and running, there are currently 12 licensed delivery services in the state. While one delivery service is convenient, having additional services will make the consumer experience even better. TheraPlant, one of the 4 cannabis cultivators, has been sold. The company's ownership has changed hands to NewCo, a subsidiary of DXR Holdco. The change did not impact their operations, and they are continuing to supply the market without incident. Finally, the former USS Chowder Pot 4 restaurant and the Restoration Lighting Gallery will now fall under the same organizational umbrella. Springfield-based INSA, a cannabis dispensary that also has locations in Florida and Pennsylvania, is planning to put down stakes in Hartford's South Meadows, where it plans to convert and expand the former 28,000 square foot restaurant on 5.2 acres into a cannabis grow facility that could be up to 84,000 square feet in size. The company paid $4 million to the Chowder Pot property and $2.5 million for restoration lighting space across the street. No date yet for the beginning of construction or an opening date for either facility. As cannabis cannot be transported across state lines, having cannabis grown in-house will keep supplying the state with premium legal cannabis products. I'm Angie Seifert from Skip Intro Advisors with the Connecticut Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News.
You would think that early adopter states for legalization of cannabis out west would be vibrant and flourishing, but that's not the case in Oregon. Testing there and everywhere continues to be a challenge in the industry, dealing with different laws in different states. Marianne Kersagi has more in her Oregon Cannabis Report.
I'm Marianne from Alibi with this week's Oregon Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. The new Aspergillus testing rules continue to make news. Fat Nugs magazine reported on the issue, calling it Moldgate. And a lawsuit has been filed against Oregon authorities over these testing rules, asking for an emergency stay. A response is expected in a few weeks. Another lawsuit filed last week alleges that Governor Kotek fired the former director of the OLCC, Steve Marks, at the behest of cannabis company owner Rosa Casares. Casares has been in the news a lot this year because of their tax deficiencies at La Moda. Also, Casares' consulting contract with former Secretary of State Shemia Fagan resulted in Fagan being fired. And finally, it's been 8 years since Oregon legalized adult use cannabis. Josh Hardeen at Bend Source outlines some of the problems with the current regulatory environment. Quote, "Those flaws include a lack of social consumption permits, events, and spaces, a regulatory agency which seemingly greatly favors alcohol over cannabis, restrictive rules that have made Oregon cannabis tourism a stifled undertaking, an underrepresented industry which employs over 64,000, and a general feeling that what the state values most about the cannabis program is the tax revenue." End quote. That'll do it for the Oregon Report this week. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Weed Talk News.
A sign of mature cannabis labor market is the efforts to unionize workers into the United Food and Commercial Workers Group. In New Jersey, that is quickly picking up steam as new dispensaries continue to open and operate. And Jill Goldsberry has more in her Garden State Cannabis Report.
Hey guys, what's going on? It's your girl Jill here with the New Jersey Report for We Talk News. And here's what's happening. More and more employees in the cannabis industry are looking to unionize, and it's official. Curaleaf, the state's largest cannabis supplier, is the latest to unionize with the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. The Local 360 announced this recently as it ramped up efforts to unionize New Jersey cannabis industry workers. All of Curaleaf's New Jersey locations, retail locations, have been duly organized as members of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. Isn't that wonderful? So Curaleaf's Bordertown, New Jersey dispensary was the last to vote for unionizing. The company's retail locations in Edgewater, Belmar, and Bordertown serve medical and adult use clients. Particularly New Jersey's union, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union Local 152 for New Jersey has advocated for social equity and cannabis policies in the state since the medical dispensaries opened. And most recently, the union negotiated a 3-year deal for employees of the Botanists, helping to secure better wages for those employees. So that is definitely something that we are happy to hear about. And in other news around New Jersey, if you've never been to a cannabis farmers market, well, there's one happening this weekend in New Jersey, particularly in Oradell. It's being presented by Weed and Wellness and Project Flex. You could spend time in the morning getting a good workout with them, anywhere between 9 a.m. and I believe 12:30, and then shop your favorite farmer flowers. Check out Weed and Wellness on Instagram for more information. I'm Jill Goldsberry with Weed Talk News New Jersey, and I will see you next week.
Oklahoma continues to be an interesting study on how not to introduce a new controversial product like cannabis into their state. And the Supreme Court there heard arguments about whether an arbitrary increase in fees is constitutional. Well, the head of the Oklahomans for Responsible Cannabis Action is named Jed Green, and he thinks this is a political conspiracy to eliminate the medical cannabis business altogether. It's just another example of the stigma that this industry deals with on a daily basis. But in Arizona, expungement of past cannabis offenses is becoming the centerpiece of talks that probably will end up in that state Supreme Court at some point. So here's Karen Black with the latest from Arizona.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Expungement is a key component of cannabis law reform at the state and federal levels. A Phoenix man serving a 16-year sentence for selling an ounce of weed was denied expungement despite a May 30th ruling by the Arizona Court of Appeals expanding eligible cases to include possession for sale. Trent Budida has already served half his sentence and was denied clemency in 2022. His legal battle is somewhat of a test case, among others in the state court system, regarding Arizona's bag expungement laws. In cannabis business news around the state, New York-based Green Rose Holding Company foreclosed on all its assets, one of which was True Harvest Holdings. The Arizona cultivator was acquired by Green Rose in January 2022 for $57.6 million and is now part of NewCo DXR. Nevada-based Story Cannabis Company is getting bigger. They just acquired 4 Nations Medicine locations and licenses, 2 in Phoenix and 1 each in Glendale and Tolleson. Story's Arizona operations now comprise 11 retail locations and 2 cultivation facilities. Apparently, a lot of pot smokers are moving to the Grand Canyon state. Between 2021 and 2022, Arizona ranked 3rd in the nation for population growth. And in the first 9 months of 2022, Arizona's adult use market saw a 55.3% increase over the year prior. Coincidence? That's this week's Arizona Cannabis Report. I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting, reporting for Weed Talk News.
Never a dull week in California. It's still the nation's #1 cannabis market. But applications for licenses are down in that state, and medical patients are upset, and corruption and the whole process continues. But Alaina Pinto has more from the Golden State in her California Cannabis Report.
I'm Alaina Pinto reporting for PCM with this week's California Report for Weed Talk News. On August 2nd, the Department of Cannabis Control put out a news release about their intent to prepare an environmental impact report for licensing of cannabis cultivation in Mendocino County. Public commenting on this proposal is now open, and it ends on August 31st, 2023. This proposal comes on the heels of the end of the state's provisional licensing in June 2023, leaving most of the legacy market losing hope and holding the bag. In other news, Ease, a California-based multi-state operator delivery service, and the company TechCrunch formerly predicted would become the Amazon of weed, is at the center of yet another lawsuit in the Golden State. Ease launched in 2014 and merged with Green Dragon, a multi-state operator, in 2021. The lawsuit filed by Green Dragon accuses Ease's board of directors of intentional and malicious concealment of the delivery company's financial condition in order to finalize the company merger. The lawsuit also claims Ease of renting out their licenses, which is a violation of the Department of Cannabis Control. Once valued at $700 million with more than $255 million in total investment capital raised, the lawsuit accuses Ease of being so low on cash that it is now pending insolvency. Corey Azaliano, the CEO of Ease and named defendant, has denied this claim. The lawsuit also names the billionaire founder of Netscape, James Henry Clark, and his longtime business partner, Thomas Jermaluk, who owns at least 35% of the company and sat on the company's board via a shell company until February 2023. That's this week's California Cannabis Report. I'm Alaina Pinto from PCM reporting for Weed Talk News.
On the international scene in Europe and in Canada, we do have 2 correspondents who keep an eye on a couple of legal countries. So in Europe, cannabis continues to be a hotly debated subject, even though Luxembourg joins Malta as the only 2 countries who have adult use available there. But Debbie Facey is in Canada. We'll hear more from her, and Lex Pelger, who is in Europe.
I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creation with this week's European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Luxembourg becomes the 2nd EU country to end cannabis prohibition after Malta. The new law allows for adults to possess up to 3 grams and grow up to 4 plants in a secure location in their home. However, public consumption remains prohibited. The government notes that the move is a public health campaign to reduce health harms and combat criminality. Buying and possessing more than 3 grams of cannabis could be punishable by a prison sentence of up to 6 months. In Albania, the parliament legalized medical cannabis despite harsh opposition. In the country once known for the illegal trafficking of cannabis, the vote allowed for the limited and controlled growth of cannabis plants. The details of the medical cannabis regulations remain unclear, but the government believes that allowing for the limited production of cannabis can boost tax revenues. Finally, in Israel, access to medical cannabis has been widened. Doctors will be allowed to prescribe cannabis for a much wider array of conditions, and the patients will no longer need to apply for a special permit to use the medicine. However, doctors still need to receive specialized training in order to prescribe cannabis, and patients will still need to pay a fees up to $100 to utilize the program. That's the European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations reporting for Weed Talk News.
Another volatile week on Wall Street as cannabis stocks are going in both directions, up and down. You know that. Here's our man, High on Wall Street, Doug Miller.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's cannabis stock report for Weed Talk News. Columbia Care announced they were going to voluntarily delist common shares from the CSE. That's the Canadian Securities Exchange. Columbia Care will continue to trade on the CBOE Canada, the new business name for the NEO exchange. But this is never a good sign for a company to have to delist their shares, because now they're going to lose out on the opportunity for new investors. And that's this week's cannabis stock report. Reporting for Weed Talk News, I'm Doug Miller.
There's a study out of Iran with over 470,000 participants who now believe that cannabis can be a factor in reducing the risk of type 2 diabetes. The conclusion was published in Phytotherapy Research, but even the authors warned other research must be done and no conclusions should be accepted until it's all completed, obviously. But out in Washington State, Matthew Friedlander has our report on that market's attempt to normalize a product that has been legal there for over a decade. So here is Matt's Washington State report.
Hello, everyone. Matthew Friedlander coming to you from the owner's office here at Skagit Organics with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. While it feels like we just got done with our legislative session, it is actually time to start planning for the next one. So 2 issues that I suspect will be front and center again this year. Home grow. Washington is still one of the only states with a legal recreational cannabis market where it is illegal to grow a cannabis plant at home. It is actually still a Class C felony to grow cannabis at home here in Washington unless you are a registered patient. Also, out-of-state ownership. This has been a contentious issue for a number of years, and I'm sure it will not be any different this year. So we'll see how that shakes out. On the federal level, we are looking at the Safe Banking Act, talk that there is a good chance that gets passed soon, but it could just get delayed again. And also lots of talk about the federal government descheduling cannabis, or I guess rescheduling cannabis to Schedule 3. So not sure how everyone feels about that, but those 2 things will really usher in the next era of this cannabis industry here in the US. It will change the entire market and industry for the good, for the bad. I guess we'll find out. That's what I got for you from Washington. Matthew Friedlander reporting for Weed Talk News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
On the Massachusetts cannabis scene, there has been some controversy about the resignation or non-resignation of the executive director of the Cannabis Control Commission. And PCM founder Jimmy Young has more in his Bay State Cannabis Report, sponsored by CNA Stores.
Thanks, Alaina. I'm PCM founder Jimmy Young, and this is the Bay State Cannabis Report, sponsored by CNA Stores. So when is a resignation not a resignation? I guess when it comes from the executive director of the Cannabis Control Commission, Sean Collins. He had told Commission Chair Shannon O'Brien that he was stepping down at the end of this year, but what he didn't explain was that he was taking 10 weeks vacation before that. O'Brien then muttered the word crisis, and it did set off a few alarms. But everything's okay now at the Cannabis Control Commission. Massachusetts-based MaryMed posted a second quarter loss of $900,000. The fact that a loss was reported is enough of a surprise because just last year, MaryMed was one of the most profitable operators as an MSO. Their CEO, John Levine, expects to make up that deficit in some of the new states where MaryMed is now operating, including Maryland. Maryland is off to a great start, by the way. With the tax-free holiday on the horizon for August 12th and 13th in Massachusetts, don't expect that to apply to your cannabis medicine or your adult use cannabis. It's all grouped in with alcohol, cars, boats, meals, and utilities. In fact, anything with a price tag of over $2,500, you can't get a break on your taxes. That's why they call Massachusetts Taxachusetts, right? Anyway, that's the Bay State Cannabis Report for this week, sponsored by CNA Stores. I'm Jimmy Young reporting for Weed Talk News. Live from the Summit Lounge is supported by CNA Stores in Massachusetts, a veteran-owned and family-operated dispensary in Amesbury and Haverhill that has the best selection in the state and a dedication to the community north of Boston.
And finally tonight, the saga of legalization in Thailand. And in most Asian countries, cannabis use and possession can actually lead to a death penalty if caught. But in Thailand, they actually have been encouraging their people to try it by sending out clones to all of their citizens. Of course, those that are 21 and older. But as you might suspect, Thailand's leniency on cannabis has increased the tourist industry there, with many Asians coming in to try it for the first time. However, they are also warned to not bring it back with them, especially in communist China, where you can still get the death penalty if possessing or using the plant medicine inside the borders. It's a good lesson to learn and to remember if you are planning to travel or traveling, so use it up before you go to the airport. Okay, that's Weed Talk News for this week. I'm Alaina Pinto. Remember, it is a brand new world, a whole new world of weed out there, so use it responsibly, and we will see you next time.
The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Canatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at canatrols.com.
We are a cultivation through to consumption lifestyle brand for the cannabis industry. Of course, the crown jewel in our product line is the Armoire home grow system. So now with Green Goddess Supply, we can take you everywhere from growing it in the armoire right through to storing it, consuming it, rolling it, storing it, you name it, A to Z. Our goal is to enable everybody and anybody anywhere to be able to produce their own organic flower quickly, easily, discreetly, and inexpensively.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it can make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems, whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that it actually will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
Safetiva Labs in Westfield is fast becoming the #1 testing lab for cannabis in Western Massachusetts. Safetiva understands the importance for accurate on-time test results for your product. That's why their current compliance panel turnaround time is less than 2 days. That's Safetiva Labs in Westfield. For more information, go to safetiva.com. The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Canatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at canatrols.com. Brandon Jones' Missouri Cannabis Report is brought to you by Baker Brands, a curated B2B marketplace for head shops and dispensaries.